Hey guys, Hackersploit here, back again with another video. Welcome back to the Red Team training series. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Red Team reconnaissance techniques. So we've already, taken a look at adversary emulation. Now it's time to get started with the Mitre attack framework tactics rather. And the first one that we're starting off with is reconnaissance, right? So what we will be covering in this video: number one, what is reconnaissance? Number two, and this is the practical aspect of the video. We'll take a look at passive recon techniques, active recon techniques, and then we'll take a look at how to automate all of these techniques using frameworks like Sniper, using tools like Amass, or performing reconnaissance with Shodan. And we'll take a look at how to use a ton of other tools. So this is going to be quite extensive, and again, reconnaissance is quite a lengthy segment or tactic, and it involves the utilization of various data sources, various tools. And again, I'll try my best to cover as many techniques as possible with as many tools as possible, so that I can give you the most comprehensive overview. What is reconnaissance? Well, reconnaissance is essentially involves the techniques that adversaries will utilize either actively or passively to gather information that can be used to support targeting or the initial exploitation phase, right? So information information gathered during reconnaissance will include details of the victim organization, the infrastructure, staff or personnel information, and this information is very useful because, again, it can be leveraged by the adversary to aid in other phases of the adversary lifecycle, such as initial exploitation or getting an initial foothold, or to scope and prioritize post-compromise objectives, or to drive and lead further reconnaissance efforts, right? Now, when we talk about reconnaissance, reconnaissance is typically split up into two categories based on the interaction with the target, or the type of interaction with the target, right? Number one, we have active recon, which involves actively engaging or interacting with the target network, hosts, employees, etc. So this will typically involve techniques like port scanning, vulnerability scans, web application scans. And the key thing to note here is that active reconnaissance, you're actually interacting with the target, you're actually interacting with the hardware, with the web application. And given that that is the case, you need to be very, very careful in regards to what you do. And of course, if you're performing a legal red team operation, you need to get permission to actually, perform your scans on the company's hardware or the company's infrastructure. And secondly, we have passive recon, right? So passive recon essentially involves utilizing publicly available information. So, information like WHOIS, DNS information, or utilizing search engine docs, or, performing search engine hacking to find what you're looking for. And again, in this particular case, it's passive because you're not interacting with the target. You're simply finding information that is already out there using openly available, information or openly available sources. Right, so now that you have an idea of what reconnaissance is, let's move on to the next step, right? Which is, again, to take a look at the tactics that are used, or the recon tactics that are used in the Mitre attack framework, right? So again, if you navigate to the Mitre attack framework website, you can see that the reconnaissance tactic utilizes 10 techniques, and all of them are, relatively important based on the type of target you're dealing with. And of course, you can utilize, if you're performing, adversary emulation, you can take a look at the techniques that have been used by other APT groups or by other groups. And in our case, we'll be focusing on the key techniques that are pertinent to, the other stages that I'll be demonstrating. So the key techniques, or the key pieces of information that we're trying to look for, are going to be IP address information, DNS information, domain information. We'll be utilizing, publicly available databases, and we'll also be looking for network information, right? So all of this is quite important, and of course will all play into our next tactic, or the next stage, which is resource development and initial access, and then of course you have execution, so on and so forth, right? That being said, that's pretty much all that I want to cover in the theoretical side of things. Let's actually get started with the practical aspect of this video. Alright, so I'm back on Kali Linux, and let's get started with passive intelligence gathering, or passive reconnaissance, right? So we're going to start off from a very simple starting point, and that is that we have a domain that we're testing for a company, and we're going to use that domain to try and enumerate as much information as possible, or to search for as much information as possible. And as I said, we're going to get started firstly with passive techniques, right, or with passive tools, etc. So the first thing we want to do is we want to identify the IP address of the website, right? Now we'll utilize the host command, and again we'll specify the domain. In my case, I'll be switching from different domains, again just to show you how dynamic the process can get. So I'll use my own website, which is hackersploit.org, right? And this will provide me with the IP addresses, both IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, as well as my mail server address. And again, this information in itself is quite useful, but again, you can see that the site has two IPv4 addresses as well as two IPv6 addresses. So that we have something going on here. So let's try and perform a bit more in terms of information gathering. So let's use nslookup to find out what else we can gather here. So nslookup hackersploit.org. And again, it gives us the same information that we were expecting. And, we utilized my default DNS server here, which is fine. But you can also utilize another DNS server. Another command that you'll pretty much want to run is going to be the traceroute command. And then, of course, we'll display the route, that your actual request takes as it goes through all the various segments or networks in order to reach the target. So for example, I can say hackersploit.org. So traceroute hackersploit.org. So you can see it goes through my router, my primary router, and then my secondary router, and then it goes through the following systems or gateways, if you will. And then finally, we can see that it actually reaches its destination with the IP here. But as I said, we have two IPs, so there's something going on here. So what if we wanted to enumerate some DNS information regarding this particular website, right? Well, to do that, we would utilize a tool like dnsrecon, right? So dnsrecon comes pre-packaged or pre-installed with Kali. So we say dnsrecon D for the domain, and then we say hackersploit.org. Sorry about that. Let me type that in correctly. There we are. It's going to start enumerating all DNS records. And again, DNS recon can be used both in a passive sense or in an active sense. In this case, we're using passive, right? So we can see from the records here that this website is protected by Cloudflare. That's why we had two IP addresses, right? And we can essentially see that the other records we get are the mail server records as well as the IPv6 records, and we have some TXT records. Which again gives us an idea of whether, for example, we have services or protection services like DKIM set up. In this case, we can see that there's a Google site verification, a TXT record that's used to verify a domain when it's set up with Google. But again, we don't get any indication that we're using any G Suite email servers, or we're not using G Suite on this particular domain, right? So now that we have essentially been able to determine that Cloudflare is protecting the site, you can also get a confirmation of that by identifying whether the website is being protected by a firewall or some sort of proxying system. And to do that, we can use WHOIS. And again, with WHOIS, you simply need to just type in the site here, or just type in the domain. So WHOIS hackersploit.org, and that'll tell us whether we have a firewall here. So again, you can see the site is behind Cloudflare, right? So in that case, we really can't identify the IP address unless the IP address has been leaked somehow, and I'll get to that in a second. We can also use the dig utility. So for example, let me just display the whatwis command, or just display the information regarding the dig utility. The dig utility is a DNS lookup utility, and we can use it again similar to DNS recon to enumerate DNS records. So for example, I can say dig and then hackersploit.org. And that'll tell me, it'll actually provide me with the addresses here. So you can see these are the A addresses, which are IPv4 addresses, as you can see here. And again, we've been able to identify that it's behind Cloudflare. Right, so what if we wanted to use our own name server? So for example, we could use a dig with our own name server, or a name server that you want to specify, like for example 1.1.1.1, which is Cloudflare, and then hackersploit.org, right? And again, it displays the same results because that really doesn't change anything there. We'll get to zone transfers in a second. But again, with dig, you can also limit the results to specific records. So for example, if I wanted to limit the dig results to, so I can say dig hackersploit.org, and I can limit it to the name servers. So I hit enter, and you can see it now gives me the name servers here, which again, we can see it's d.ns.cloudflare.com and jim.ns.cloudflare.com. So we get the actual name server's name. It performs the reverse DNS resolution, right? From the actual IPs that we got earlier, and now we have the actual name servers here. We can also again display all the records with dig, similar to DNSRecon, and to do that we simply type in any, so that will display all the DNS records. So I'm just going to let that complete running there. That's going to take a few seconds. So let's try that with zonetransfer.me, because it'll be much more useful. So zonetransfer.me, we hit enter, and I'll give that a few seconds there. All right, so I ran that, and I specified the Google I specified the Google DNS servers there for my lookup, and again, you can see the records that it was able to identify. So of course, it discovered the name servers, the two name servers here, and the A address, which again is the website IP address. And again, we can also use WAF here to identify whether zonetransfer.me is behind any particular firewall. So again, if we type that in, let's see if we're able to identify anything there. If that's not the case, then that means we have an IP address for the server, and you can see there is no WAF, and we can probably start performing some port scans on it. But before we do that, again, still on passive reconnaissance, we can also use dig to identify other types of DNS records, as I mentioned. So instead of using any or searching for any, we can also look for MX records, which are mail server records. And yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes down to using dig. Now, when it comes down to the site or domain information, and I'm simply referencing WHOIS information here. The key information that we're trying to gather in the context of red teaming is the domain registrar, and again, trying to identify the hosting provider, right? And of course, there's multiple ways we can do this. Number one is by using the WHOIS utility. So for example, we can say WHOIS zonetransfer.me, right? And let's try and identify the information here, the key information. So we can see that the registrar is Mesh Digital. It was created on, or it was actually registered initially in 2011, and it expires at the end of this year in December, right? So that gives us a bit of an idea there. The registrant organization is called DigiNinja. So we now have an organization name. In this case, it's DigiNinja. And we have the name servers, and DNSSEC is not set up. So that means we can pretty much get all this useful information that way. Alternatively, we can also use the Netcraft site or the Netcraft service to, again, identify what a website is running and simply enumerate information regarding that particular site. So for example, if I just reload this here, there we are. And we can also use the zonetransfer.me site, zonetransfer.me, and we can perform a lookup here, and let's see what information we can get from Netcraft. So again, firstly, we get the site title. It was first seen in March 2019. There's no site rank. As for the site network information, you can see that the NetBlock owner is OVH static IP. The hosting country is in the UK. The IP address we get here, again, appears to be the server IP. We also we don't get any IPv6 address, but we get the name server, the domain registrar, the organization again, and we also get the DNS admin right over here, Right, let's take a look at the IP delegation. We can see how the actual IP range is actually delegated, and to the point where it reaches the OVH static IP net block over there. We also get the SSL TLS information. So again, key piece of information that you're trying to identify here is whether the SSL certificate is valid, whether it's expired, so on and so forth, and that information can be quite useful. Right, let's see what else we can identify. We get the signed certificate timestamps, which tells us that the SSL certificate authority is Let's Encrypt. It also checks whether the site is vulnerable to Heartbleed and the hosting history for the site. It doesn't have DMARC for emails here, which is great, and no DKIM, so email spoofing might be an option here when we are trying to perform our phishing attacks. We'll take a look at that in the next video. And then we get the server-side technology and the client-side technology. So again, this site displays quite a bit of information here. And again, you can utilize it to find more information regarding a particular site. Another website we can use is dnsdumpster.com, which is extremely extensive. And again, we can run it for zone transfer.me, right? And we can just hit search. And that's going to look for, it's going to look for DNS records. And again, we get the DNS servers, we get the mail servers or the mail records, the MX records. And we can see that it utilizes G Suite or Google Mail right over here. And we get the mail server addresses. We get a Google site verification TXT record, as well as the host records here. And of course, it gives you a mapping of the domain. You can download the XLSX or the spreadsheet for the hosts. And you can also view the graph, which is quite useful. So DNS Dumpster graph, and it takes you through this. And from this, we can see that the names, the DNS is actually set up on Amazon. Or well, not really Amazon, but we also get the ASN information, and we can see we get a few banners here. So we can see that the target is running OpenSSH 2.0. Let's see whether we can see any other information. Right, so it's pretty much the MX information or the mail server information. Right, so DNS Dumpster can be very, very useful when trying to perform DNS enumeration or DNS recon, as it were. And it's extremely helpful. Now, in the context of identifying web technologies for a particular domain or a website, you can use the whatweb utility that again comes pre-packaged with Kali. So I can say whatweb hackersploit.org. That'll give me an idea of what stack is being used, whether there's a CMS in place, etc., etc. So let's try this with hackersploit.org. You can see there is a redirect here. So 301 redirect. It goes through Cloudflare, and we get the redirect location. As for the let's look at the technologies here. We can see we have PHP 7.4.22, so you can pretty much start identifying vulnerabilities if that version of PHP is vulnerable. We can obviously tell that it's using a LAMP stack because again, we're able to tell quite simply that it's using some sort of caching system. So again, from this header, we can tell that it's using the WordPress Cloudflare Super Cache plugin, and that tells me again, it tells me two things. Number one, we have the site is running WordPress, and number two, it's using a particular plugin. Of course, we're able to identify that from this particular banner here. So we know it's running WordPress, and of course, this can be used to identify vulnerabilities with CMS tools like WordPress Scan. To of course identify the plugins and users and themes, and then of course identify whether any of them are vulnerable to any particular exploit. So all of this information, as you can see, is very useful in staging the attack. We can also utilize we can also run this on the zonetransfer.me website, and let's see what we can get there. I spelled that incorrectly. Zonetransfer.me. Let's see what this particular site is utilizing. Right, so there is a redirect, and we can see we get the email, we get our first email. So that is a customer service email. So that is service, customer service at zonetransfer.me, pippa@zonetransfer.me, and these are emails you pretty much want to be saving because we've gathered them already. So again, we're just going to say zone transfer emails. We'll just save it in a file, and let me type that in correctly. There we are, and we'll just paste them in here, right? So these are all the emails for the zonetransfer.me website. Now, of course, you can see that this is quite cumbersome because we're doing it manually, and we'll take a look at how to automate all of this with various frameworks. But there we are, we're able to identify that's running Apache web server, and we get what appears to be an author, so a user or a person that we can actually start performing OSINT on, and identify various other aspects of them. So again, I don't really recommend doing that in this particular case because again, I don't have permission here, but we get a user here or a person or pretty much an employee, so Robin Wood. And yeah, so we've been able to gather quite a bit of info already. Now there are a few other plugins that you can use for your browser. So for example, if I search for Mozilla add-ons, let me just open that up here. One really useful add-on is the Wapalizer add-on. If I just search for it, there we are, Wapalizer. This essentially will identify technologies on the website. So it'll tell you whether the site is using ACMS, what frameworks it's utilizing. So again, if I add it here, give that a few seconds to add it. There we are. It's going to add Wapalizer. And now if I go to zonetransfer.me, and again, I can just open up Wapalizer, and you can see right over here, it displays the font scripts, the programming languages, the web server technology. In this case, we can see it's using Apache, and then of course the miscellaneous JavaScript libraries if it is using any. But again, it doesn't give us much information here. As for more information, you can purchase a plan here, the Pro plan, and get your API key, and that'll give you a detailed overview. Another plugin that I like using is BuiltWith, right? And many of you may have heard of BuiltWith before. Again, it's a site profiler tool. And again, it will display a list of all technologies that are used on that website or web page, if you will. So I'll open up BuiltWith here on the zonetransfer.me website, and you can see that it gives us a much more of a detailed report. And again, for the payment system, we can see pretty much it looks like it's well, it doesn't give us information as so buy me a coffee. That's the payment or donation system, RSS. Let's look for any other useful information we can gather here. We get the HTTP headers there, which is again quite useful, and you can do this straight from your browser. Right, so that is how to essentially get information for a particular website using various publicly available sources and databases. Now, the next step, of course, is to start gathering information pertaining to particular employees, right? And that, of course, will depend on various things. Number one is, are you targeting an organization, and is your entry vector or your access point an organization name or their domain, right? So if you already have the organization name, like for example, DigiNinja, we can use that, and the tool we'll be using is the Harvester. Now the Harvester comes pre-packaged with Kali, and I can just demonstrate how this works. I'll just bring up the help menu here. And it gives you a very, very good overview of how to use the tool. So it's essentially used to gather open source intelligence on a company or domain. And in this case, what we can do is we can essentially utilize whatever information we have and try and find information regarding that particular company. So if we start off with the domain or the company name DigiNinja, let's try and find out whether we can identify any information from Google. And of course, the sources here are provided. You can specify more than one source. So let's use maybe Google, LinkedIn. Let's see what else we can use. Bing is quite helpful. Bing, the search engine. You can specify multiple sources using the comma separator. And you can use any of the sources provided here. So let's try and see whether we can find any information regarding DigiNinja as an organization from Bing, Google, LinkedIn, etc. Alternatively, you can also use the domain name. So we'll also try that. So again, I'm just going to let this complete. All right, so we can see that we get quite a few results in regards to employees or individuals that are in some form associated with DigiNinja, but of course we can't confirm that, and these are pretty much, I'm guessing, all coming from LinkedIn. There we are. But if we take a look at all the results here, let's see whether we can actually, there are quite a bit of results in regards to individuals. We can see that LinkedIn users found are 317, right? And of course, their names or their LinkedIn profile titles in this case don't really give much in regards to their role at DigiNinja, if at all they work for DigiNinja. But as I said, we can pretty much again identify them manually by sifting through this, and you can use the grep utility to identify any matches for DigiNinja. So for example, in this case, again, let's see if we can identify. There we are. So we can see that ICT trainee, DigiNinja, and we get a match there, but in terms of the company, we can't get any employees with a solid confirmation that they work there. So you pretty much will have to resort to manual searching of these people on LinkedIn to identify whether indeed they actually work at DigiNinja in some form. And of course, the next step will be to try and identify emails. Now, in this case, we aren't able to identify any emails, as I can see here. We've simply been able to identify the users themselves, but no emails and no hosts found there. Now, alternatively, as I said, we can also use the site zone transfer, the domain, and we'll specify the source as Google. Alternatively, you can also use the all sources, but some of these sources require an API key. So again, we can use Google, and there are a few others like that I like utilizing. One of them is, of course, Google. Let's see, what else? Twitter, LinkedIn. So Twitter. Sorry, I don't want to space that out. LinkedIn. We can also use Bing as well. That also works. Yahoo is also quite useful in that sense. We can also use the sublister tool. So sublister, and I'll get to using sublister in a second. But there's various other sources that you can use, and let's see whether we're able to identify any information from these sources. And again, as you can see, it's a matter of, again, testing and knowing what you're trying to find. So what you're trying to find. So again, I'm just going to let this complete searching. All right, so we aren't able to get any results on this front, which is perfectly fine, and it is actually what I was expecting. As I said, in this particular case, it looks like it would be much more useful to utilize the organization name to give you a much wider gamut of results to work with, as this domain, and you've seen this multiple times with companies. They may have domains that are not, related or don't have the company name within the domain name. So again, that's something that you need to take into consideration. Right. So again, we can also change this we can utilize, for example, my domain here. So what I'll do is I'll just change the domain to hackersploit.org, and this is the last one I'm going to run here because I want to cover a few other techniques that are quite important. Right, so we can say hackersploit.org. We can also limit results to 500. That's also very useful. And then for the sources, I'll just use Google. And we'll then specify maybe Yahoo, Bing, LinkedIn, and I think that's a good starting point. You can also perform DNS lookup if you want. That can be done by using the N flag. We can hit enter, and let's see what we're able to enumerate from this particular domain, right? So I'm just again going to let this complete. All right, so in this case, again, we get 0 results, which is fine. As I said, we can also switch that up with the company name. So for example, Hackersploit, and that'll give you, as I said, a wide gamut of results. Right, so let's move on to the next technique that I wanted to highlight. And remember, we're still in the passive information gathering or reconnaissance phase. And that is, of course, subdomain enumeration. And we're looking at the passive way of doing this, which again will involve utilizing various databases or publicly available databases like Google, or utilizing Google Docs is one of them, and we'll get to that in a second. But the tool we'll be utilizing is Sublister, and Sublister can be installed on Kali by simply saying apt-get install Sublister. And then of course I can just run the command here. So Sublister, let's see if it actually will work, whether I have it installed. There we are, Sublister. And again, it's very simple. If you want to start performing subdomain enumeration, you can open up the help menu if you want as well. There are various sources or engines that you can use. One of them, of course, is going to be Google. You can also utilize other sources if you want. In this case, let's just run the default command, which again simply involves typing in Sublister and then the name of the domain. So hackersploit.org. And that's going to use all the engines. So Baidu, Yahoo, Google, Bing, Ask, Netcraft. And you can see we have a block request here, which pretty much means we're exhausting all our checks there because we've been performing quite a few lookups with Google. But there we are. We're able to identify quite a few subdomains, right? And I've created some of these to demonstrate this. The only active one, of course, is forum.hackersploit.org. But we can see I created at one point a test subdomain videos. And this is very useful information. So you can also output that information as well using the output option here. And you can save that. Again, that can be used again for further analysis or for further testing. And of course, again, it can be used to stage your attacks. Right, so that is how to perform subdomain enumeration using Sublister. We can also do this with Amass, which I'll be covering after I've taken you through all the manual techniques, and we'll take a look at how to use the automated frameworks after the fact. But I wanted to take you through a few other techniques, manual techniques, and of course that is using Google Docs. So for example, google.com, and I'll show you exactly how Sublister and all of these other passive, automated recon tools like Sublister perform, subdomain enumeration with Google. So we can essentially search for subdomains for a particular domain. So for example, if I say, site bbc.com, that's going to limit the results to the site bbc.com, right? So you can see it's going to provide you with various results here. However, what if I wanted to display subdomains for the site bbc.com? Well, I can use the site the site search fact, the actual site specification there, and or the search filter as it were, and then I can use the asterisk or the wildcard option, and then I specify so I can say wildcard.bbc.com, and that'll essentially enumerate all the subdomains that Google has indexed for the top level domain bbc.com. But in this case, you can see it's still displaying bbc.com. So we want to exclude the domain bbc.com to only display subdomains, right? And we can do this by saying site, and then we can exclude bbc.com or www.bbc.com, which I think will be much better. So I hit enter. And now we have all the subdomains here. So you can see we have beta.bbc.com. So it looks like BBC actually has a few beta domains. We also have WS partners, which is interesting. Let's see what that's about. We also have mobile.bbc.com. So that's their mobile domain, which I'm guessing will redirect to bbc.com. There we are, it redirects as expected. And then it looks like we have WS partners, which is an interesting subdomain. They also have a shop for Canadian shop, and then account.bbc.com. That's for, I guess, users want to sign in. And then you also have what appears to be pages.topgear.bbc.com, so on and so forth. But you can see how you can utilize this to find subdomains. So for example, if I want to search for subdomains for let's see, if I just wanted to say, let's see, if I wanted to search for subdomains for a particular site, like we can also try Hackersploit, right? So hackersploit.org, and then I want to exclude hackersploit.org, like so. Let's see if that is done correctly here. Site.hackersploit.org. It looks like it isn't able to find any there, but that should work because I'm essentially limiting it there. But Let's try and limit those results. There we are. So we limit or we get rid of results that contain hackersploit.org. You can now see we have the forum, and that's pretty much the only one that is active here. It looks like there are a few others. Let's see on the next pages, and these are all the forum posts here. So again, in this case, you can see that the only active subdomain that Google has spied for the domain hackersploit.org is forum.hackersploit.org, right? And this is a great way of actually quickly identifying subdomains that you may not have realized are there. But of course, you can also utilize automated tools like Sublister to find the same information. But this is exactly how it does it. It utilizes the search engine filters to get exactly what it's looking for. And of course, I have a video that covers Google hacking or Google Docs, so you can check that. You can check that out as well to find specific information. Right, so I'll take you through a few others here. What if I wanted to? Let's go back to Google here. And let's say I wanted to look for, particular, I can say site bbc.com, and I want to limit the results to a particular file type, or, I can search for a keyword. So, I can say admin, right? And again, you can see that doesn't give us anything useful there. It simply gives us the matches for the keywords in particular posts. Again, to counter that, what I can do is I can then say, for example, if I say, I can say in URL, and then I can say admin dot and use the wildcard there, or I can simply say admin.php. That doesn't work there. So let's try admin. There we are. We don't get anything there. We can also try login. There we are. Looks like we get a few login pages there. And we can use in URL to locate or identify particular login pages. So for example, let's see, hackersploit.org. This might not be indexed by Google because I disallowed it. If I say WordPress admin.php, right? You can see that it doesn't give any results, and that's correctly done because I disallowed WordPress admin.php from being indexed by Google. But if I just say in URL WordPress admin.php, it'll actually display all the matches, all the sites that have been indexed, and you can. This is a great way of identifying WordPress websites. Alternatively, you can also utilize various, a whole slew of other search filters, when it comes down to identifying particular directories. But as I said, I've covered that already, and I just wanted to cover a few more. So again, I'm just going to cover this one more time. So for example, bbc.com, and if I wanted to limit the results to only display or to look for files, so for example, PDFs, let's see any PDFs for bbc.com. Again, it asks me to specify traffic lights. I'm just going to do that here. So verify that. And again, that's interesting, Google. I'm not doing anything illegal, just demonstrating a few search terms here. There we are. So again, we get various PDFs on bbc.com. We can also change the extension to anything else. So for example, document files. And hopefully I don't have to keep doing this. Hopefully, as I said. Let's see, bicycles. Well, that's a scooter, I guess. So no bicycles there. Motorcycles, yeah, let's see if that's correct. All right, so yeah, that's giving me too many capture requests, so I'm just gonna stop it there. But you get the idea. As I said, if you want to learn more about Google Dorks, you can actually check out my video on that. It'll be linked in the description. And let's move on to active intelligence gathering. And of course, as I mentioned, active DNS active intelligence gathering is pretty much interacting with the target now. So let's get started with DNS, right? And the first technique I'm going to be highlighting is DNS zone transfers. And I'll just head back into my browser here, and we'll be using zonetransfer.me as it's set up for this. And the tool we'll be utilizing is DNSRecon, right? So DNSRecon, we use the domain specifier. We say that is zonetransfer.me. And DNSRecon, I'll just type it in manually. So zonetransfer.me, and then in order to perform or to attempt to perform a zone transfer, we'll say AXFR, And I've already explained what zone transfers are in the past. Again, a video for that will be added to the description, so you can learn more about that particular technique. But this will essentially give us a list of subdomains or other records that might be useful, if I'm to just keep that as simple as possible. And the zone transfer in this case was successful. It was able to copy the DNS records successfully, or to transfer them. And we get much more records, or many more records than we were able to get from passive techniques, right? And in this case, we get a few TXT records that are interesting, like Robin Wood. We can also see something that pretty much tells us whether, gives us an idea as to whether this site may be vulnerable to a shell shock attack. It gives us the mail records here, as well as some subdomain records. Those are IPv6, but you can see we have asfdbbox.zonetransfer.me, Canberra office.zonetransfer.me, and the IP address there, DC office, email, home. And these are extremely useful, DNS records here. But of course, as I said, a key thing to note is these may be internal DNS records that may only be useful, or can only be utilized inside an internal network, right? So this may not be external. So you need to check all of these. And of course, all of this information should be saved. So again, as I said, zone transfer was successful, as you can see. And we get a few other records here. Yeah, and that's pretty much it, right? So that's how to perform zone transfer. We can also perform subdomain enumeration using brute forcing with a tool like Fierce. So again, if we don't want to rely on publicly accessible information, or we don't utilize search engines, we can also perform brute force. We can also perform subdomain brute forcing using a tool like Fierce. So again, Fierce is a fairly simple tool to use, and I've covered how to use it before. But what we can do is, and again, Fierce is a very active tool, so you don't want to run this passively. In order to run it, all you need to do is just specify the domain, and in this case, zonetransfer.me, and it will perform a zone transfer, or it'll actually attempt to perform a DNS zone transfer. And then you simply need to provide, you can then provide a word list. Again, that has a list of subdomains that you want to test. So for example, use subdomains, but if you leave it as is, it'll start performing a brute force with its own word list. So for example, if I hit enter, you can see it performs the zone transfer there. Now again, if you want to perform a subdomain brute force, again, you can say subdomains. So again, I can just type that in there. Subdomains, DNS servers, right? We pretty much can provide the DNS server subdomain file. I can provide that here. So let me just set that up. Right, so I'm just going to perform this on hackersploit.org because I just remembered that it performed the zone transfer successfully, which means it doesn't need to perform brute forcing, right, or subdomain brute forcing, and that was quite redundant. But again, I can say hackersploit.org, and again, that's going to then, it's going to provide us with the name servers, and then it'll test a zone transfer. That's a failure, wildcard failure. So now you want to give it a few seconds to a few minutes, and it's then going to begin the subdomain brute force. And of course, there are various other tools. One of them will actually check out in a few seconds that does the same thing. And that, of course, is knockpy, and I'll get to that in a second. But of course, this will take quite a while. So again, you can use Fierce to do the same thing, but I personally recommend using knockpy. You can install knockpy by typing in knockpy, and that should install it. And to run it, all you need to do is type in knockpy, and I'll just type it in here. And then we can open up the help options here. And again, to perform a subdomain brute force, you can simply just run a fast scan or a full scan, which I recommend. And you can also set a timeout if your requests are being blocked. So for example, we can say knockpy, and then we say zone transfer.me, and we hit enter. It's going to get the word list. You can also specify your own word list. There we are, using the W option. if you've generated one already. So you can see it's going to begin the brute force process. You also can change, let me just see the option that I wanted to highlight here. Right, I've also, yeah, I actually went through that. You can also set the timeout. That's what I wanted to cover, or I wanted to explain. Right, so it's going to go through the subdomain brute force, and let's see whether we were able to identify any subdomains this way. If, for example, we weren't able to, to perform the zone transfer. Right, so it's going on, and again, I just wanted to highlight one more tool or resource that's extremely helpful here. So I'm just going to terminate that. When using knockpy, as I said, you can also utilize a word list, your custom word list, and I recommend using or downloading the seclists word list. And within seclists, you have the ability to there are some very useful subdomain prefixes that you can utilize. So in this case, I'll just use a custom word list. So user share seclists, and I can use discovery, and we're looking for DNS, right? And we have the fierce list, the word list that fierce uses here as well. You also have a DNS word list by Jason Haddox, which is extremely useful. So for example, we can use subdomains just as an example, and of course you have subdomains top 1 million, and you can also use, that's quite a large one. In this case, I'll just use this one here. Right, so it's going to utilize that word list again. So you want to give it a few seconds, and let's see whether we're able to identify them. For some reason, it's actually displaying it in ASCII here, which is actually not giving us the results correctly. But we should be able to actually identify a few here. That being said, that's how to perform subdomain brute forcing with fierce and knockpy. Let's move on to the next technique. All right, so the next active reconnaissance technique we're going to be exploring, which I've explored quite extensively on this channel, is port scanning. Now, of course, port scanning is going to depend on whether you've been able to identify servers or hosts that you can actually scan and that are actually valid. So again, if you're able to identify the IP, so for example, if we use the example of the zonetransfer.me records here, the DNS records, you can see where we've been able to identify the IP address for the zonetransfer.me site, and of course we can perform an nmap scan on that, which I already have done. And I'm not going to be covering how to use nmap in this video because I have a very extensive playlist on how to do the same. But if I display the results here, you can see that I performed a fast scan, a very simple scan here, and you can see that if we can actually run a scan, we can run the same scan here. And let's try and identify the service versions just so that we can do that live. So I can, we can actually take you through the process of performing port scanning with nmap. But again, in this particular case, what I'm doing is or should be considered illegal, but again, I'm just going to do it really quickly here. But you can see that I'm using the SYN scan here, which is much more stealthy. Of course, I can also use the timing options or the timing templates with nmap to slow down the scan. Or I can also speed it up, but again, you have to be cognizant of the target and whether or not it can actually withstand high traffic. Secondly, you can also utilize other tools like mass scan or rust scan, although I don't recommend using rust scan if you don't know how to use it, because again, it's a very, very intensive scanner that sends a lot of packets. So again, that's something that I want you to refrain from using unless you know exactly what you're doing and the environment you're working in. I would recommend using nmap. As I said, you can follow my videos on nmap. I'm quite extensive on that. But again, I'm just going to let this nmap scan complete here because, I'm now performing service version detection. All right, so the service version scan is complete, and you can see, as I said, the reason I'm using zonetransfer.me is because it's set up to teach you things. In this case, we have the the web server running on port 80 and 443, so that's with SSL or a TLS certificate, and you can see that they've actually modified the Apache banner that's been displayed, and you can see it says, instead of giving us the service version number, it says sparkles. So that's actually quite useful. Alternatively, you can also use Netcat to also grab banners and to identify service versions. That's also a great technique. As I said, you can also utilize any other scanners that or any other port scanners that you want to utilize. But I also want to touch upon one other technique, which is very, very important in this in the reconnaissance stage, which is vulnerability scanning. Now, as I've said before, vulnerability scanning will depend heavily on what your target is running, so on and so forth, whether it's running a web server, whether it's using a CMS. So for example, let's start off with Nmap scripts. There's tons of Nmap scripts that again can help you with vulnerability scanning or enumeration. So for example, if you're trying to identify whether a particular site is vulnerable to shell shock or heartbleed, so for example, I'll just say user share nmap and scripts, and then I'll grep for heartbleed. Like so, you can see we have the heartbleed script here, and you can utilize that script in your scans. So for example, I can just specify it here. We can also search for the shell shock script, but you can use Nmap as a vulnerability scanner. It's quite useful that way. In this case, I'll just specify port 443 there, and do we need to specify anything else? I'll specify the script option, the Nmap script option, and then of course I say SSL heartbleed, and we hit enter, and again that will help us identify whether the site is vulnerable to heartbleed attacks. But you can see that this is quite useful. Now, of course, you can also utilize other tools like Searchsploit to identify vulnerabilities for particular services that are running on the target. Let's see whether this is actually completed. It doesn't give us any results, so that is inconclusive. But you can also utilize various Metasploit auxiliary modules if you wish. But again, you need to be cognizant of your target. So again, for example, if the target is vulnerable to Searchsploit, you can then start identifying particular vulnerabilities or exploits here with using Searchsploit. And Searchsploit is simply a command line utility that allows you to search for exploits on exploitdb.com. And you can see that you have the exploit code here that you can then copy and utilize. The most common one, of course, is going to be the memory disclosure exploit, which allows you to dump the memory from the web server, and that can give you various important bits of information. Right. So again, as I said, vulnerability scanning is going to be highly dependent on your target. Another tool that I like using is Nikto. So for example, let me just open up the Nikto help menu, and I have a video again that covers how to use Nikto. It allows you to scan for vulnerabilities on a particular web server or website. So in this case, we can run it again on zonetransfer.me. And as I said, what I'm doing, I'm pretty sure is illegal. But again, this site was set up for educational purposes. So again, you want to run the scan, and you can also specify the target port that you want to use. So for example, if I wanted to use the port, I can use the port 443, so on and so forth. But Nikto is a great way of identifying vulnerabilities. The next tactic or the next technique that you can utilize is to, of course, perform directory brute forcing. And again, I've covered this quite extensively. You can use derb to perform directory brute forcing, and you can also use GoBuster. You also have dirbuster, and then of course there's the whole aspect of using fuzzing. I recommend using wfuzz. Wfuzz is a great fuzzer that allows you, of course, to identify. You can do quite a few things with it, and again, you can check out the video that covers how to use it in depth. But of course, I'm not going to be doing this because I don't have any targets to test here. But once you've identified your target, you can utilize all of these tools to, of course, identify vulnerabilities. Now, when it comes down to WordPress or CMSs, you can utilize tools like CMS map. So for example, if let me just search for it. So CMS map here. And we also have WordPress scan, which again is used to scan for WordPress vulnerabilities. So WordPress scan. I'll just search for the GitHub repository here. There we are. So CMS map allows you to, again, detect security flaws in the most popular content management systems like WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, and Moodle, as it says here. So this is a great way of identifying vulnerabilities. I will be making a video that covers how to use CMS map and WordPress scan in the future. Well, I've already covered how to use WordPress scan, but a lot has changed since then. So I'll be making a video now to do that. But yeah, that's pretty much how to, again, identify vulnerabilities within content management systems. That being said, we've taken a look at how to perform all the both passive and active reconnaissance techniques manually. Let's take a look at how to automate all of these tests using automated recon frameworks like recon-ng, Amass, Sniper, etc. Right? So let's move on to how to use the Sniper framework. So I'll see you there then. All right, so the Sniper framework is a fantastic reconnaissance framework. As you can see, it's the ultimate all-in-one offensive security framework. It allows you to, of course, perform various forms of reconnaissance, both active and passive, and I'll be taking you through both. And I'm not going to be going through the web interface because I think it's very important to actually go through how to use it using the command line. But what you can do to use it is simply, just clone the repository. The GitHub link for this framework or this tool will be in the description section. And I'm just going to clone it here into my recon directory that I created for this video. So it's going to clone it. And again, based on your internet connection, it's going to take a few seconds to a few minutes. So that is done. I'm just going to head over into the directory here, and now you need to install it. So to install it, all you need to do is simply type in sudo bash, because it has issues with Z shell if you are using Z shell, and just use the install.sh or bash script and hit enter. And it's going to tell you that it's going to install it under user share Sniper. That is okay. So do I want to continue? I'm going to hit enter. It's going to then install the various dependencies that it requires. So again, I'm just going to let this go through the installation process. All right, so Sniper is done installing all its dependencies, and it says done. So, to get started, just type in Sniper and we should be good to go. So as I said, Sniper is quite an extensive framework, and that is of course demonstrated by on the GitHub repository. So it gives you the usage instructions here, and we're primarily going to be focused on stealth or passive recon with Sniper and active recon. So for example, we can again, let me just minimize this, we can start our first scan with Sniper. So again, if it's installed, we should be able to access it directly from here. So let me just type in Sniper. Let's see if that works. That must be run as root. All right, so I'm going to say sudo Sniper. All right, so that's working. That's fantastic. All right, so let's open up the help menu here. Or let's display the various help options. Now, as I said, the tool is quite extensive. Let's start off by performing an active reconnaissance with Sniper, and we're going to be targeting a domain, right? So again, a simple scan that we can run is we specify the target with the T option, but we can say sniper t hackersploit.org, and let me just run that with as root. So there we are, scanning hackersploit.org, and it's going to check for, it's going to run various checks. So it's going to gather DNS information, it's going to ping the host, and it's going to check for open ports, HTTP ports. So it's going to run a wide variety of scans here. And the great thing is that the results are going to be stored for us, and then we can, of course, analyze the results to determine or to identify any important information. So again, I'm just going to let this complete. And as you can see, it's utilizing techniques that we did manually, which is great, but it's automating all of it. So that's fantastic. You can see it's run the whatweb command here. So again, I'm just going to let this complete the scan. All right, so the scans are done, and I've run the scans for both zonetransfer.me and hackersploit.org, and that is how to run how to perform active reconnaissance with sniper. Now, again, the reason why I'm not taking you through the results right now is because I actually want to take you through the passive reconnaissance phase, and then of course I'll show you how to access the results and the reports, so that again you can then identify the information that's pertinent to you. So in order to perform a stealth scan or passive reconnaissance, we simply again type in sniper. Let me just make sure to add the prefix sudo there, and again we specify the target. In this case we can just say zone transfer.me, and then in this case we're running a stealth scan, so we change the mode now to stealth, right? And if we want to perform OSINT and recon mode, we use the O and RE flags, and that is again going to perform recon from all sources. So we hit enter, and again, as I said, this is now a passive passive reconnaissance. So again, it's not going to interact with the target, which is something that you want to be very careful with, because if you're performing active recon with sniper, it's going to perform a lot of checks. It's going to actively engage with the target, so perform nmap scans, directory brute forcing, so on and so forth. So again, I'm just going to wait for this to complete, and then we'll take a look at how to access and then of course analyze the reports. And then after that's done, we're going to move on to the next tool that I wanted to cover, which is Amass. And so again, I'm just going to let this complete the scan. All right, so the scan is complete. That was the passive scan, and again, it's going to tell you when you complete the scan that the reports are going to be saved in user share, sniper, loot, workspace, and under the domain. So again, if you have multiple domains, they're going to be separated, which is great. So again, you can access it by opening that particular folder. It also creates a shortcut to the sniper directory, so you can access it instead of navigating into the user share directory. So that's great. So again, what we need to do is head over into loot and then workspaces, or workspace rather, and then zone transfer.me, and then you can click on reports, and it's going to generate, or it's going to have all your reports for you. So for example, the stealth scan that I ran, this is an HTML report. So if I double click on that, you can see, again, give that a few seconds, and it gives you the report here in sort of a raw format. Of course, it exported it into XML and then HTML. So you get a fairly readable report here that again gives you the results, and it categorizes them. So for example, for example, if we take a look at the harvester results here, you can see that it gives us the IPs, an email here, so pippa@zonetransfer.me, and then the various subdomains here, and then it runs metagoofle, and let's see what else. It also runs URL scan and a few other tools. So there's quite a few utilities and tools that it uses, and it automates this entire process and gives you a comprehensive results therefore that are actionable, and you can go through them and analyze them. And of course, this was the passive scan. Right, so that's essentially how to perform reconnaissance, both active and passive, with sniper. As I said, there are much more advanced options that allow you to also target web applications. But again, as I said, it's fairly what it's doing really is just automating all the manual processes that we did earlier and giving them to you in a format that's understandable. So again, definitely check that out. As I said, I will be making a video on how to use sniper, and I'll be taking a look at all the options, all the advanced options. That being said, let's move on to the next tool that I wanted to cover, which was Amass. All right, so this is the GitHub repository for Amass. The link to it will be in the description section. You can check it out. So again, just a brief description here. The OWASP Amass project performs network mapping of attack surfaces and external asset discovery using open source information gathering and active reconnaissance techniques. So this is a list of all techniques that can be utilized, and we'll be taking a look at how to use it. So again, on Kali Linux, you can install it by using the aptitude package manager, as it is a package in the Kali repos. So again, installing it should be fairly simple. All you need to do is say sudo apt get install Amass, right? And you hit enter, and I already have it installed. So let's take a look at how to use it for reconnaissance. So we'll start off with passive reconnaissance, and I'll just open up the help menu here. And you can see that Amass utilizes subcommands that again, differentiate functionality or are used to categorize functionality. So for example, you have the intel subcommand, which is used to discover targets for enumeration. You also have the enum subcommand, which is used to perform enumeration and network mapping. You then have viz for visualizing enumeration results. You can then track the differences between enumerations using the track subcommand, etc., etc. Right, so let's take a look at how to enumerate some. Let's start off by using the intel subcommand. And the information that we're going to be enumerating first is going to be WHOIS information. So, I can say Amass, and then I specify the subcommand, which in this case is intel, and then I say WHOIS, and I can then specify the domain, so zone transfer.me, and then I can specify the output directory. So output directory will be, we are currently working within my recon folder, so I'll just call it, we'll just call it zone transfer. We'll just call it zone transfer. I think that should be fairly simple, so that we can identify it later, or we can utilize it, because the output files are going to be very important, as I'll be taking you through the process of of course, using the visualize subcommand to create various reports. But in this particular case, let's see what this is able to enumerate. So I'll hit enter, and we're going to give that a few seconds here, and let's see what information we can obtain. Of course, I'm taking you through a simple process firstly. So WHOIS is a fairly simple command there. But again, if we actually take a look at the zone transfer folder, so I'll just list out the files within zone transfer. You can see you have the amass.log and amass.txt file there. So that's how to perform a simple intel scan. Now, in our case, we want to perform enumeration, right? So we are going to be using the enum subcommand. So we're going to say amass enum, and we then specify the domain, which in this case, again, we're just going to say zone transfer .me. Hopefully I can type it in correctly, and we hit enter, and that's going to enumerate information for us. Now, of course, as I said, this is something that you pretty much want to be outputting into the output directory, so that we can actually view later on. But again, as I said, let's just run this scan here, and let's see the results we're able to identify, because if we head over to the GitHub repository, you can see there's a user guide here that's very, very useful, and that'll take you through the process of utilizing the utility. So again, for example, in this case here, for the most basic use of the tool for subdomain enumeration, which is exactly what we've done here. So again, it just gives you an idea of each of the subcommands and what they do, and all the various all the various commands or flags under each of the subcommands. For example, the intel subcommand, these are all the flags that you can use, and as we just did with WHOIS. And then, of course, you have the enum subcommand, so on and so forth. So again, you can take a look at that for more information regarding the various subcommands, how they work, and the various options available under those subcommands. All right, so Amass has completed enumerating information pertaining to this particular domain, which in this case is zonetransfer.me, and you can see all the subdomains it was able to identify. And then it provides us with the subdomain names and the network blocks here. So for example, in this early on, we were able to identify the network block that's used primarily, and again, it also provides us with the other ones. And this information can be very useful if this server or this particular, this server that's hosting the website is part of a larger network. So you can see that here, this is the network here, or the network block rather, and that can be useful, as I said, for targeting or initial access. Right, so that was how to perform a simple enum scan with Amass. Now you can also run a bit more of an advanced type of scan that again will display relevant information. So for example, if we wanted to display sources and IP addresses, we can also do that. So we'll run the same command, but in this case what will change is we'll also say we want the sources, the IP addresses, and we then want to output it into so again we're saying output, the output directory is just going to be zone transfer, and again we can just hit enter. And again, I'm just going to wait for this to complete. And then once that is done, I'll take you through the viz sub command and how you can use that. But we can also take a look at a few active enumeration or active recon techniques with Amass. So again, just going to let this complete. All right, so the scan is complete, and in this case it provided us with the IP addresses as well as the sources, as you can see here when it was enumerating subdomains. So it gives you the source. So for example, here we have the sources CRT/SH. It provides us with the domain and the IP for that domain or subdomain. And for example, here with Riddler, we're able to identify a subdomain owa.zonetransfer.me, and it provides us with the IP address there. So again, this is very, very useful when you want to again display the source and IP, the source and IP address. And again, we have this particular output saved for us. Let's take a look at one active reconnaissance technique or one technique that I typically utilize with Amass, and that is to perform directory or subdomain brute forcing, as it were. And again, we can do that with Amass. We simply type in Amass and we say enum. We're using the enum subtask here. And we then specify the domain. So we can say zone transfer.me, and we can then specify again the source and the IP, as that is information that's very useful. And then we specify the brute option. And again, the output directory, which in this case is going to be zone transfer, and that's going to perform subdomain brute forcing. And right, so we can run that here, and I think I got that spelled incorrectly. So let me just type the zone transfer domain correctly there. There we are, zone transfer.me, and that's going to then begin the subdomain brute forcing. Right, so again, we can let that scan run, although as I said, I don't want to do that right now. So we can actually take a look at how to use the viz. Let me just head over to the GitHub repository. Let's take a look at how to use the viz subcommand. The viz subcommand is used to create enlightening network graph visualizations that add structure to the information gathered. This subcommand only leverages the output directory and the remote graph database settings from the configuration file. Right, so in conjunction with the viz subcommand, we can output our results into the following formats. And number one, we can output it into a D3 format, which is what we're going to do. And that's again d3.js. You can do some research on that, but it essentially provides you with a very useful graph, as I'll take you through in a few seconds. And then you have the GEXF, which is output to graph exchange XML format. You can also output it to Maltego if you want to import data from Maltego. Or if you want to output data that can be used in Maltego. You can also export or output the results into viz.js, or as it says here in the description, output HTML that employs viz.js, and it gives you the examples that you can utilize. So again, as I said, I don't want to perform any brute forcing, so I'm just going to terminate that scan there. And I'm just going to clear up my terminal, and if we want to again list out our reports, we can utilize the database. So we can say amassdb, and we then specify the directory, which in this case our output results were stored in the zone transfer directory, and then we can simply say list, and that will show us the various results or reports here. So we can use these reports and we can of course generate visual reports from them. So we can say amass viz, and of course we specify the directory where our reports or results are stored, in this case zone transfer, and we're outputting it to D3. So we hit enter, and now if we head over into zone, we can actually see the file there. So amass D3 HTML, and we can open that up. So I'm just going to head over to that directory. So desktop and recon and Amass d3.html, and that outputs the results for us in the D3 format. So again, to essentially get an understanding of what's going on here, you can see that it's quite disorganized at the moment, and that's primarily because we haven't performed enumeration well. But if we can look for the scan that we did complete, the passive scan here, let's see, those are DNS, that's DNS there. Let's see if we can find one interesting here. The interesting results that we can actually analyze. We can see we have the A records here, and you can hover over it to provide you with the subdomain. As I said, you can experiment with the output formats to find one that meets your requirements. I just wanted to use this example to demonstrate the various options available to you. So if you hover over, again, I'll just explain the color code really quickly. Orange provides you with the IP address, green is the subdomain, and if you hover over pink, that's the net block, and then dark blue is going to provide you with the ANS right over there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you hover over red, that's going to be the domain. So there we are, we can see zonetransfer.me, and then we have the various subdomains here that you can explore, and you can again, in this particular case, explore their links and relationships. Yeah, so that is how to use Amass. I've taken you through the process of performing active and passive recon, and taken a look at a few scenarios or techniques that you can utilize when performing reconnaissance. Let's take a look at how to perform passive recon with recon-ng now. All right, so I'm just going to clear up my terminal, and we are going to open up recon-ng. Recon-ng should come pre-packaged with Kali Linux, and I have an extensive playlist that covers how to use the recon-ng framework, and you can check that out. I'm just going to be taking you through passive reconnaissance and how to utilize the framework, right? Right, so when you hit enter, you can see it's going to tell you that no modules are enabled or installed. That's perfectly fine. The first thing you want to do is type in the help command. The help command gives you a list of commands that you can utilize. So for example, the dashboard, database, marketplace, modules, options, the shell, snapshots, etc. So we are going to firstly we're just going to type in help marketplace because we need to install modules. So I'm just going to say help marketplace, and it says the usage instructions are printed here. So marketplace, install, refresh, remove, search. So we can search for a particular module. However, we can also leave the search. We can also not provide a search keyword here, and that's going to display all the modules available. So they're sorted similarly to Metasploit modules in the sense that they're sorted by function. So discovery, recon, and you have a few others here, reporting, right? So for example, if we take a look at the recon modules, let's see, if we are interested in WHOIS information, we can actually just use the marketplace search feature and say WHOIS, right? And we can search for a module that meets our requirements. So for example, we can use the WHOIS miner. So if we want to install this module, we can install it by typing in marketplace install, and then we provide the module name there. That's going to install the module for us, and then we can then use the modules command, and then we can search for a module. So for example, we can say module search, and we can see the modules that are installed, or you can type in a keyword. And to use this module, we simply say modules, and we then say load, and paste in the module name there, and you can see it's now active, as it's going to be encapsulated in brackets there. And we can now list the options menu here. So options, we can say options list, and the only option we need to change in this case is the current value, which we can set to we can say set source, or in this particular case, we can open up the help menu to display the various options. If you want to know more about a particular module, you can type in info, and you can see that you can what all the source options are used for. So for example, the default the default value, or rather the source key that we need to change here, is where we specify the company details. Now, of course, we need to interact with the database to a certain degree here, and I'll just take you through that in a second. But that's the process of searching for a module, installing it, and then loading it. Now, of course, when it comes down to using it, and in this case, this is a passive reconnaissance technique, because we are looking for we're essentially trying to perform or look up WHOIS information for a particular domain. If we list out the options here, let's see, let's take a look at one important option that I need to cover, which is the database, right? So if we take a look at the database options here, so database, insert, we can, of course, query the database, we can delete entries from the database, etc. But in this case, we can essentially add a company or an organization, add their domain, and then have that, or actually set the company details here, and then we can run this particular module. Alternatively, you can also create a workspace. So, for example, if I say workspaces, let me open up the help menu here. If I say, we can actually, it's the dashboard. No, I think we have the workspace option here, but you can specify the default workspace, or you can create another one. So now that that is clear, as I said, if you want to learn more about this framework, you can check out our videos on that. Let's actually take a look at how to run this particular module. All right, so in this case, we're going to be using the zonetransfer.me domain. So we're going to say options, set, and we are going to set the source to our domain, so zonetransfer.me, and we then hit enter. And if we then options list, similar to Metasploit, you can see that the value for the source is set correctly, and then we hit run. And that is going to perform a WHOIS lookup there, and you can see it's not going to display any information there. We can also run this on another domain. Let's try our own domain here, hackersploit.org, right? And we run that again. So no information found. And again, I just wanted to take you through the process of searching for a module, installing it, loading it, and then setting the source and then running it. Now that we know how to use it, let's actually search for a few modules that are useful. So marketplace, we can actually exit from here, and we'll just reload recon-ng again. So I'll just start it up again there, and we will then say marketplace, search, and we can search for DNS, for example. You can see these are the modules available. As I said, if you want to list all the modules available, this is the way to do that. But let's look for something that's interesting, or a module that can provide us with useful information. One of them that I really like, or that's very useful, is the built with module. We also have brute hosts there, which is an active reconnaissance module. You also have, let's see, you have the WHOIS POCS module, which I believe also works quite well. So let's try that. Marketplace, install, we'll then say modules load, and we then paste that in there, and then options list, and we set, we can actually say options set, we set the source to zone transfer.me, and we hit enter. Now, in some cases, these modules may not work, as you can see here, or may not provide you with any useful information, which is why we're going through some of the useful ones here. So you can also utilize nmap, mass scan, and any other results here. So you can import results from any of these tools here. I just wanted to explain that. Or so there's also the module, the discovery module here, that essentially finds interesting files pertaining to a particular source or domain. But there is one that I wanted to highlight here, which was very, very useful, and I frequently utilize it whenever I'm using recon-ng. And let me just see if I can identify it or I can find it here. Yeah, the Netcraft module. So we can say marketplace. We can actually just take a step back here, and we can say marketplace, install paste in the module name there. So modules load, and then we paste in the name of the module there. So options list, and we set, so options set, and we then say set the source to, we can again just run zone transfer.me, we hit run, and that's going to try and enumerate information from zone transfer. As I said before, some of the modules may not work based on changes with the, for example, APIs for particular sites. But in any case, I wanted to take you through the process of how to utilize recon-ng for passive and active reconnaissance. As I said, all the functionality is limited to the various modules that are available here. You also can create your own modules based on the functionality, the functionality that you want to actually provide, or that you want to have with recon-ng. And yeah, that's essentially how to use recon-ng. Alright, so that is pretty much all that I wanted to cover in this particular video. Now that you have an understanding of the various ways, techniques and tools that you can utilize to, of course, perform reconnaissance on your targets, your target networks, the target organization, we can move on to the next video which will actually cover the process of exploiting the target systems, and we'll talk about setting up a C2 server, various exploitation methods of vectors from phishing to others, and we'll explore all of that in the next video. So I'll see you there.